The Black Road to Khand. Chapter 1. The Summons of the East. In the days when King Elessar held dominion over Gondor and the reunited realm of Arnor, there came tidings from the eastern marches that stirred unease in the hearts of the wise. A messenger, dust-covered and bearing wounds, arrived at the gates of Minas Tirith with word that the ancient road to Khand had awakened with dark purpose. Prince Faramir, now steward of Gondor under the crown, received the messenger in the Tower of Guard. "My lord," gasped the ranger, "the Black Road stirs. Those who venture upon it return not, or return changed." Speaking of shadows that walk in daylight and whispers that promise dominion over death itself. The king was abroad in the northern lands, establishing the borders of his realm, and thus fell to Faramir the burden of this dark news. He summoned to council the captains of the guard and the lore masters of the city. Among them came Mithrellas, a maiden of Dol Amroth, whose lineage bore traces of elven blood, and whose sight pierced veils that remained opaque to mortal eyes. "The road was built in the days of the kings of old," spoke Hurin the Tall, chief among the lore masters, "yet it follows paths far more ancient, carved when the world was young, and the shadow of Morgoth first fell upon Middle-earth. Men say it leads to Khand, but the wise know it reaches toward domains that were old, when Numenor was but a dream." Mithrellas raised her eyes, gray as the sea in storm. "I have seen this road in dreams that come with the dawn. It calls to something that sleeps beneath the foundations of the world, something that stirs now that the ring is destroyed and the old bonds are broken." Thus began the quest that would shake the very pillars of the earth. Chapter 2. The company of the Black Road. Faramir chose his companions with care, for he knew that whosoever walked the Black Road must be strong in will and pure in heart. First came Baragon, captain of the guard of the citadel, whose loyalty had been proven in the darkest hour. With him came Targon, a knight of Dol Amroth, tall and fair, bearing the silver swan upon his shield. From Rohan came Eothane, son of Elfhelm, a rider whose horse, Shadowfax's son, could outrun the wind. The dwarf lord Nain, kinsman to Gimli, brought his axe and knowledge of the deep places of the earth. Last came Mithrellas, against the counsel of many, for her sight would be needed in the darkness ahead. They departed Minas Tirith on a morning when mist clung to the Anduin and ravens gathered in the eastern sky. The company rode first to Osgiliath, then beyond to where the road began to show its true nature. Here the stones were black as midnight, not laid by the hands of Gondor's builders, but rising from the earth itself, as if the very rock yearned to form this pathway. "See how no grass grows beside this road," observed Nain, his voice heavy with foreboding, "and mark how the horses shy from its touch. Indeed, their steeds would not set hoof upon the black stone, and they were forced to lead them along the borders of the road while walking upon it themselves. With each step eastward, the weight of ancient malice pressed upon their hearts, and Mithrellas began to speak of visions that came unbidden. "I see a crown of iron," she whispered, "and a throne built from the bones of mountains. There is one who was great among the valor ere the world began, who fell into darkness deeper than the void itself." Chapter 3. The Watchers in the Waste. 3 days they traveled the Black Road, and on the third evening they came upon the first of the Watchers. These were not the stone guardians of Cirith Ungol, but creatures of shadow and malice given form by the will of their master. They stood like pillars of darkness beside the road, and from them emanated a cold that cut deeper than the wind from Mordor's peak. Baragond drew his sword, but Mithrellas stayed his hand. "Steel will not bite them," she said. "They are wraiths of the ancient world, bound to this place by oaths spoken when the earth was young." The Watchers turned their invisible gaze upon the company, and in their regard was the weight of eons. Yet they did not bar the way, for the Black Road welcomed all who would dare its length, knowing that few would return unchanged from its ending. As they passed between the Watchers, each member of the company felt a chill touch upon their hearts, as if icy fingers had traced the borders of their souls. Eothen's horse reared and would have fled, but the rider of Rohan held firm to the rein. "They mark us," said Nain grimly. "Whatever power rules this road knows now of our coming." Beyond the watchers, the landscape began to change. The familiar hills and valleys of Gondor's eastern marches gave way to a desolation that seemed older than time. Here, the very air shimmered with malevolence, and strange lights danced on the horizon where no city should stand. The road stretched endlessly ahead, black as the void between stars. Chapter 4. The Dreams of Darkness. On the seventh night, as they made camp beside a spring whose waters ran black beneath the moon, the dreams began. Each member of the company was visited by visions that spoke to the secret desires of their hearts, offering power beyond mortal ken in exchange for service to the one who waited at road's end. Beregond saw himself crowned king of Gondor, with armies numberless as the stars at his command. Targon beheld Dol Amroth raised to heights of glory, surpassing even Numenor at its peak. To Eothein came visions of Rohan's borders extending to the Sea of Rhûn, with herds of horses thundering across endless plain. But the dreams that came to Mithrellas were different, and in the morning she was pale as moonlight. "I saw the music of creation," she whispered, "and heard the discord that Melkor wove into its harmonies. The one who calls to us was present at the world's beginning, and knows secrets that were hidden even from Manwë himself." Nain alone claimed no dream, but his eyes were troubled. "In the deeps of Khazad-dûm we found records of the Elder Days," he said. "There were powers then that walked Middle-earth openly, beings of might that make the Balrog seem as a candle before the sun. Some fell with Morgoth, but others fled to the dark places and waited. The Black Road continued its relentless march eastward, and with each league traveled, the sense of approaching doom grew stronger." Chapter 5. The City of the Dead Kings. On the 10th day, they came upon ruins that defied comprehension. Here rose the remnants of a city that had never appeared in any map or chronicle of Middle-earth, built of black stone that seemed to drink in light itself. The architecture was neither of Gondor nor Rohan, nor even of the Númenórean, but bore the mark of a craft that predated the arrival of the Edain in Beleriand. "This is Tharband," said Mithrellas, reading inscriptions carved in letters that hurt the eyes to look upon. "The city of the dead king, where they ruled who served the shadow before Sauron, was even a name whispered in the darkness. In the center of the city stood a tower of impossible height, its peak lost in roiling clouds that never moved despite the wind. And from this tower came a sound like the beating of a vast heart, echoing across the desolation with a rhythm that seemed to match their own pulses. As they walked the empty streets, they saw evidence of the city's former inhabitant. Not skeletons, for those had long since crumbled to dust, but impressions left in the stone itself. Shadows of being that had been tall as trees and crowned with darkness. The Númenóreans were not the first to challenge the Valar, Nain observed, studying reliefs carved into a fallen obelisk. These kings sought dominion over death itself, and in their pride they called upon powers that should have remained bound. At the city's eastern gate, the Black Road resumed its course, winding now through mountains that rose like the fangs of some primordial beast. Chapter 3. The Whispering Mountain. The peaks through which the Black Road wound were called by the Easterlings the Arid Harnan, the Southern Grey Mountain, though no Gondorian map marked them thus. Here the road climbed through passes carved with symbol that predated even the Elder Day, and the very stones seemed to whisper in languages that had been old when the world was young. Eothen's horse could go no further, and with heavy heart, the Rohirrim released his steed to find its way back to the Green Land. They continued on foot, climbing ever upward, while the weight of ancient malice pressed upon their shoulders like a physical burden. In these heights, Mithrellas began to change. Her elven sight, always keen, now pierced veils that mortal eyes could not penetrate, and she spoke of things that made her companions' hearts grow cold. "I see the void that lies beyond the circles of the world," she said, her voice distant as wind through empty hall. And I see what dwells there, waiting for the barriers to weaken. The Ainur were not the only beings present at creation. There were others, cast out before the music began, who have watched and waited through all the ages of the world. The road brought them at last to a vast chasm, spanned by a bridge of single black stone, so narrow that they must walk in single file with the abyss yawning on either side. Below, instead of depths, they saw stars, not the familiar constellations of Middle-earth's sky, but alien patterns that spoke of realms beyond mortal understanding. Crossing this bridge, they felt the touch of the void itself, and knew that they had passed beyond the borders of the world they knew. Chapter 7. The Throne of Shadows. Beyond the bridge lay Khand, but not the land of warriors and horsemen known to the chronicles of Gondor. This was Khand, as it had been before the rising of the sun, when darkness covered the face of the deep and terrible things walked the earth openly. Here stood a palace built of crystallized shadow, its spires reaching toward a sky where no stars shone. The Black Road ended at its gates, which stood open as if awaiting their arrival. Within, corridors stretched endless, lit by a radiance that came from no torch or lamp, but from the very stones themselves. They walked these halls in wonder and terror, past chambers filled with treasures that kings would die for, gold of Valinor, jewels that held the light of the two trees, weapons forged by the Noldor in the glory days of Gondolin. Yet none dared touch these things, for upon each lay the mark of their true owner. At the palace's heart lay a throne room greater than the Hall of Elrond, or the court of Thranduil. The throne itself was carved from a single mountain peak, black as midnight, and crowned with stars that were not stars, but points of darkness in a cosmos of light. Upon this throne sat a figure robed in shadow, tall as the Tower of Barad-dûr, but bearing a majesty that made Sauron seem a petty tyrant. As they approached, he lifted his head, and they saw a face that was fair beyond description, yet terrible beyond comprehension. "Welcome, little children of Ilúvatar," he said, and his voice was like the music of the spheres corrupted into discord. "I am Thuringwethil, the Shadow Lord, first among those who refused the gift of existence and were cast into the void ere the world began." Chapter 8. The Revelation of the Shadow Lord. The being upon the throne rose, and as he did, his form seemed to expand until he filled the vast hall with his presence. Yet his voice remained gentle, almost sorrowful, as he spoke to the company that stood transfixed before him. "You know me by another name," he continued, "though that name has been hidden from the histories of Middle-earth. I was there when Melkor first sang his discord into the music of creation, but my rebellion began even before his, for I looked upon the gift of existence that Ilúvatar would bestow, and I deemed it a curse rather than a blessing." Mithrellas found her voice, though it trembled as she spoke. "You are not of the Ainur, indeed not, child of two kindreds. I am older than they, one of the Uleri, the primordial ones who existed in the void before creation, when Ilúvatar spoke the word A and brought the world into being. We who dwelt in the darkness beyond were not destroyed, but merely displaced." Baragon's hand moved to his sword, but the Shadow Lord's laugh was like the sound of dying stars. "Your courage honors you, son of Gondor, but what can steel do against one who helped weave the very fabric of reality? I do not seek to harm you. Indeed, I have need of your service." The revelation struck them like a physical blow. This being claimed to predate not merely Sauron or even Morgoth, but the very foundations of existence itself. And the Black Road had been drawing servants to him for millennia, building an army for some purpose beyond mortal comprehension. "The void calls to its children," Thuringwethil continued. "Soon the barriers will weaken, and what was cast out will return. I offer you the chance to stand with me when that day comes, to rule over the ruins of Ilúvatar's creation as princes of a new order." Chapter 9. The Test of Wills. What followed was not a battle of swords or strength, but a contest of wills that shook the very foundations of the Shadow Palace. Thuringwethil sought to bend each member of the company to his service, offering them visions of power that made their earlier dreams seem pale shadows. To Faramir's lieutenants, he showed kingdoms beyond number, stretching from the Grey Havens to the Sea of Rune. To Eothaion, he offered mastery over all the horses that had ever run beneath the sky. To Nain, he revealed the secrets of creation itself, the knowledge of how mountains were raised and metals forged in the earth's heart. But it was upon Mithrelas that his greatest effort was focused, for in her mixed heritage, he sensed a bridge between mortal and immortal that he might use for his purposes. To her, he offered sight beyond the circles of the world, knowledge of what lay in the void, beyond the stars. "You feel it already," he whispered, his voice echoing in her mind. "The hunger for what lies beyond the narrow borders of this world. I can show you realms where the very concept of death is unknown, where thought itself takes form and will shapes reality." Yet each of them, in their turn, found strength to resist. Beregond remembered his oath to the White City and the trust that Faramir had placed in him. Targon recalled the white shores of Dol Amroth and the sound of gulls crying over the bay. Eothaion thought of the green hills of Rohan and the songs of his people beneath the stars. Nain's resistance came from deeper sources, the ancient strength of the Khazad, who had been shaped by Aule himself to endure in darkness. And Mithrelas, though she wavered at the edge of surrender, was held back by love of the simple beauties of Middle-earth, the taste of lembas, the sound of elven song, the touch of morning dew on grass. Chapter X. The Breaking of Chains. Their refusal to serve enraged the Shadow Lord, and for a moment his mask of benevolence fell away, revealing the true horror of what he had become through eons of existence in the void. The palace shook as his wrath manifested, and cracks appeared in the crystallized shadow of its walls. "Fools!" he cried, his voice now terrible as the grinding of glaciers. "You choose the narrow confines of mortality over the infinite expanses of eternity. Very well. If you will not serve willingly, you shall serve nonetheless." He raised his hand, and from it flowed chains of pure darkness, seeking to bind their souls to his will. But as the bonds reached for them, Mithrelas cried out in a voice that rang like silver bells, "By the light of Arendil, by the name of Elbereth, by the authority of the one who made all things." The chains shattered like glass, for though Thuringwethil was ancient beyond measure, he was still a creature, and the power that had created him could also constrain him. The Shadow Lord staggered, his form wavering like smoke in wind. "Impossible!" he gasped. "The old words have no power here, beyond the borders of the world." But Mithrelas smiled, and in her smile was the light of Valinor. "Light exists even in the void, my Lord of Shadow. It was the first thing that Iluvatar created, and it cannot be unmade, not even by one who remembers the darkness before creation." With her words, true light began to shine in that place of shadows, and the companions saw the Shadow Palace for what it truly was. Not a monument to power, but a prison built to contain one whose rebellion against existence had made him a danger even to the void itself. Chapter The Haim, the Great Deception. As the light grew stronger, the truth of their situation became clear. They were not in Khand at all, nor even beyond the borders of the world. The Black Road had led them in a great circle, and they stood now in the depths beneath Mount Doom, in chambers that had been sealed since before Sauron claimed Mordor as his realm. The road was a trap, Mithrelas said wonderingly, and we were not the first to walk it. Look! Around them lay the remains of other companies, knights of Gondor from ages past, princes of Rohan, even elven lords who had sought to investigate the mystery of the Black Road, and found instead imprisonment in this place of shadows. Thuringwethil's laughter was bitter as wormwood. "Did you think me so foolish as to reveal my true dwelling? The road draws the mighty and the noble, those whose strength might threaten my plans when the barriers weaken. Better to have them safely contained, their power drained to feed my own." But even as he spoke, his form grew less substantial, for the light that Mithrelas had called was burning away the darkness that sustained him. He was revealed at last not as a primordial power, but as a wraith of tremendous cunning, one of the spirits that had fled the wreck of Numenor and found refuge in the ancient places beneath Middle-earth. "I was chamberlain to Ar-Pharazôn in his madness," he admitted, as his form began to fade. "When the waves came to claim Numenor, I was among those who called upon powers beyond the circles of the world, but instead of salvation, I found only emptiness, an existence of hunger and shadow. The revelation struck them like thunder. This was no ancient enemy of creation, but a corrupted Numenorian, driven mad by the cataclysm that had claimed the greatest of mortal kingdom." Chapter 14. The return to light with the truth revealed. The Shadow Lord's power crumbled like sand before the tide. The crystallized shadow of his palace melted away, revealing the natural stone of the chamber. The Black Road itself began to crack and split, for it had been sustained by will alone, not by any true magic. As Thuringwethel's form dispersed into mist and memory, he spoke one final warning. "You have won this day, children of light, but there are others like me in the dark places of the world. When the Fourth Age passes into history and men forget the lessons of the past, we shall return. The hunger for what lies beyond the borders of existence cannot be sated by mere defeat." Then he was gone, and the companions found themselves in natural caverns beneath the ruins of Barad-dûr. The way back to the surface lay open before them, lit by sunlight filtering down through cracks in the stone. They climbed toward the light, carrying with them the weapons and treasures that had been scattered through the Shadow Lord's horde, not claiming them as spoils, but gathering them for proper burial or return to the realms from which they had been taken. When they emerged at last into the clean air of morning, they found themselves on the plains of Gorgoroth, but the land was no longer blasted and empty. Grass had begun to grow in the ash, and flowers bloomed where once only thistles had taken root. The Black Road was gone, as if it had never been, leaving only natural pathways winding through the reborn landscape. Yet in their hearts, the companions knew that the warning they had received was true. There would always be those who sought to escape the bounds of mortality, who hungered for the infinite and terrible freedom of the void. They returned to Minas Tirith as the sun set behind the western mountains, bringing with them news of victory, but also of vigilance needed. For while this shadow had been dispelled, others remained, waiting in the deep places of the world for their time to rise again. But for now, Middle-earth was safe, and the light of the Fourth Age shone bright upon the kingdoms of men. The Black Road to Khand had ended not in conquest, but in wisdom, and the tale would be remembered in the halls of kings as long as the world endured. Thus ends the tale of the Black Road to Khand, as set down in the Red Book of Westmarch, and confirmed by the Chronicle of Minas Tirith. Let all who read these words remember that the greatest victories are often won not through strength of arms, but through steadfast refusal to surrender hope, even in the darkest hour. Epilogue. The dawn of vigilance, the cleansing of the eastern marches. In the years that followed the breaking of the Shadow Lord's dominion, the eastern marches of Gondor underwent a transformation that scholars would later call the Second Flowering. Where once the Black Road had carved its malevolent path through the landscape, healing waters began to spring from the earth, as if the very stones sought to cleanse themselves of the corruption they had borne. King Elessar, upon his return from the northern campaigns, listened with grave attention as Faramir recounted the tale of their journey into darkness. The king's eyes, which had looked upon the Palantir and gazed into the depths of Sauron's malice, recognized the deeper significance of what had transpired. This was not merely the defeat of a single enemy, he declared before the assembled Council of Gondor, but the uncovering of a threat that has slumbered since the drowning of Numenor. If one such wraith survived the cataclysm, others may yet lurk in the forgotten places of Middle-earth. Thus began the Great Survey, a methodical exploration of every ruin, every cave, every ancient site within the borders of the reunited kingdom. Companies of rangers, accompanied by lore masters and those gifted with elven sight, ventured forth to map and ward the dark places where shadows might gather. Mithrela's, her perception forever changed by her glimpse into the void beyond the world, became the chief among these seekers. She established the Order of the Star Glass, warriors and scholars united in purpose, who carried with them vials of water from the Mirror of Galadriel and fragments of Mithril, blessed by the remnant of the Eldar. Their motto, inscribed in letters of silver upon gates of every fortress in Gondor, read, "Vigilant in light, steadfast in darkness." The testimony of Beregond. In the 4th year after the breaking of the Black Road, Beregond the Faithful set down his account of their journey in the Hall of Records. His words, carved in stone tablets that were placed beside the throne of kings, spoke not only of the perils they had faced, but of the strength they had found in unity. Know ye who come after that evil does not always wear the face of orcs or the aspect of dragon. Sometimes it appears fair, speaking of wisdom and power, offering gifts that seem beyond price. We learned that the greatest weapon against such deception is not the sharpness of sword, but the clarity of purpose and the bonds of fellowship that unite hearts in common cause. In the depths beneath Mount Doom, when the Shadow Lord offered each of us dominion over the kingdoms of Middle-earth, we found our strength not in refusing his gifts, but in remembering why such gifts held no appeal. For what value has a crown if it is purchased with the betrayal of those we are sworn to protect? What worth has power if it is gained by abandoning the very principles that make us worthy to wield it? The testimony of Beregond became required, reading for all who would serve in the guard of the citadel, and his words echoed through the generations as a reminder that corruption's greatest victories are won not through force, but through the slow erosion of ideal. The Scrolls of Targon. Targon of Dol Amroth, master of ships and student of the ancient lore, devoted his remaining years to researching the origins of the shadow roads that had once crisscrossed Middle-earth. In the libraries of Minas Tirith and the archives of Dol Amroth, he uncovered references to similar paths in the chronicles of the Elder Day. Roads built not by earthly powers, but by the will of those who sought to escape the confines of mortal existence. His great work, The Paths of Shadow, a chronicle of the roads that should not be, became the definitive text on such matters. In its pages, he recorded not only the destruction of the Black Road to Khand, but evidence of at least 7 other such pathways that had existed throughout the ages of Middle-earth. The Grey Road of Forochel, which had led unwary travelers into the frozen wastes, where time itself moved differently. The Silver Path of Eregion, used by certain Noldor lords who sought to return to Valinor by forbidden means. The Copper Track of Rovanion, which had vanished during the War of the Last Alliance, but whose influence still lingered in the nightmares of the woodmen. Each road, Targon theorized, had been created by those who refused to accept the natural order of existence. Mortals who sought immortality, immortals who craved the ultimate freedom of non-existence, and those caught between who desired neither fate but something altogether other. The creation of these paths, he wrote in his final chapter, represents perhaps the greatest heresy possible in Iluvatar's creation, the rejection not merely of one's fate, but of the very concept of fate itself. Those who walk such roads seek to step outside the music of creation entirely, to exist in the spaces between the notes where silence reigns eternal. The Song of Eothin in Rohan, the tale of the Black Road entered the oral tradition through the voice of Eothin, who composed the Lay of the Shadow Faring during the long winter nights in Edoras. The song, performed by Scops in the golden halls of the Mark, emphasized not the horror of their journey, but the triumph of simple virtues over cosmic malevolence. From Mundberg's towers we rode away, when dawn broke gray on evil day, to face the shadow's ancient might, with naught but love of home and light. No magic sword or elven ring could guard us from the Shadow King, but memory of the grass and rain that nurtured horse and child of plain. In darkness deep where no star shone, we stood as one though each alone, and found that evil's greatest fear is simple faith held crystal clear. The song became so popular that it was sung from Isengard to the Sea of Rhun, and travelers reported hearing its melody even in the loneliest corners of the wild, as if the very air had learned to carry its message of hope. The chronicle of Nain, the dwarf lord, returned to the halls of his people with revelations that shook the very foundations of dwarven lore. In the deep archives of Erebor, he discovered tablets that spoke of the Uleri, the primordial one that the Shadow Lord had claimed to be. But the dwarven records told a different tale. According to the most ancient chronicles, carved in the days when Aule first awakened the Seven Fathers, the Uleri were not beings that had existed before creation, but rather the nightmares of creation itself, fragments of discord that had been cast off when Melkor's theme was woven into the music, given form by the collective fears of the awakening world. They are real, Nan wrote in his Testimonies of the Deep Roads, but their reality is that of shadow cast by light, of cold defined by warmth, of hunger given meaning by satisfaction. They exist because we exist, and they hunger for our existence precisely because they have none of their own. This revelation cast the defeat of the Shadow Lord in a new light. They had not merely overcome an ancient enemy, but had denied sustenance to a force that fed upon the very concept of abandoning hope. In refusing Thuringwethel's gifts, they had starved him of the despair that was his only nourishment. The implications troubled the wise, for it suggested that such beings could never be truly destroyed, only denied the fear and hopelessness that gave them power. Vigilance, therefore, was not merely advisable, but essential, a duty that would pass from generation to generation until the world's ending. The wisdom of Mithrella. As the years passed and her hair turned silver beneath the weight of her visions, Mithrellas established the Hidden College in the hills above Dol Amroth. There, she trained others who bore the gift of far sight, teaching them to recognize the signs of corruption before they could take root. Her greatest work, however, was not written but woven, a tapestry of mithril thread and starlight that hung in the highest tower of the college. Those who looked upon it with the proper sight could see within its patterns the entire history of Middle-earth, from the music of creation to the departing of the last ship from the Grey Havens. But more than history, the tapestry showed the streams of possibility that flowed from each moment, the paths that led to shadow and those that led to light. Students would spend years learning to read its patterns, understanding how choices made in the present could echo through the ages. The future is not fixed, Mithrellas would tell them, but neither is it chaos. There are currents in the stream of time, and those who understand them can guide their people away from the whirlpools of despair and toward the harbors of hope. Among her students was a young woman named Finduilas, who would later become the first queen of the Fourth Age to bear elven blood, and whose reign would see the establishment of the Watchmen of the Void, an order dedicated to monitoring the boundaries between what is and what should not be. The legacy of the Fourth Age. As the Fourth Age moved toward its close and the dominion of men reached its fullest flower, the tale of the Black Road to Khand became more than history. It became prophecy. For Thuringwethel's final words proved true. When men forgot the lessons of the past, the shadows stirred once more. But each time darkness gathered, whether in the form of a new road appearing in the wilderness or whispers of power offered in dreams, there were those who remembered. The Order of the Starglass endured, their vigilance unbroken. The songs of Rohan carried their warnings across the plains. The deep delving folk of the mountains kept watch on the foundations of the world. And in Minas Tirith, in a room beneath the Tower of Guard, there stood a simple monument, 5 swords arranged in a circle around a crystal that held light captured from the breaking of the Shadow Lord's realm. Upon its base were carved the names of those who had walked the Black Road and returned: Faramir, Baragond, Targon, Eothan, Nain, and Mithrellas. But beneath their names was another inscription, added by command of King Elessar himself. Here lies remembrance of those who chose the narrow path of light over the broad way of shadow. May their example light the way for all who come after, until the world's ending and the final dawn. For in the end, that was the true victory of the Black Road to Khand, not the defeat of a single enemy, but the establishment of a principle that would outlast kingdoms and ages. That evil could be resisted not through might alone, but through the simple choice to remain true to what one loved, no matter what promises of power might tempt one to abandon it. And so the Fourth Age passed into legend, and the legend passed into myth, but the truth remained, carved in stone and starlight, and the songs of peoples who remembered that the greatest darkness is always overcome not by the brightest light, but by the smallest flame that refuses to be extinguished, no matter how fierce the wind that seeks to blow it out. Thus ends the full chronicle of the Black Road to Khand, as preserved in the archives of the Hidden College and the Songs of the Mark, and confirmed by the testimony of the stars themselves, which looked down upon these deeds and found them worthy of remembrance until the world shall be remade.